Hello and Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Rammal Hashmi and welcome to another episode of New Wave Global. Today we have with us Ahmed Nauraiz Rana, who is an economist at the World Bank, and we're going to discuss the recent IMF agreement. Thank you, Nauraiz, for joining us.
Not a problem, Rammal. Looking forward to this discussion.
Right. So just, before diving into the questions I have, let's just set the brief stage for the overview of Pakistan's recent economic landscape. We see that in 2023, Pakistan, they were able to catch a very significant deal with the IMF, where they were able to capture a staggering $3.3 billion. And this deal was crucial for Pakistan because I think that it provided a path for stability, and after recently approving the second and third stages, we've come to a point now where IMF has also approved the release of an additional $1.1 billion, and which I think marks a pivotal step towards the ongoing economy's recovery efforts. We saw that Finance Minister Mohammed Aurangzeb, he is eyeing a long-term arrangement with hopes of, securing a deal that's spanning at least 3 years, which underscores, the urgency and the gravity of the situation. So, against this backdrop, Noris, my first question to you would be, is a long-term IMF package necessary? What is it essentially, and especially in light of, let's say, the recent $3 billion, deal? What form do you think that this new package would take, and how would it differ from the one that's already expired in April?
Well, Ramal, first of all, thank you for setting the stage and for providing the background. And I agree with a lot that you've said, but I think the response to it is not very binary. It's not a yes and a no question. First things first, we definitely do need the IMF because, IMF is referred to as the lender of the last resort. So any country, whether it's Pakistan or let it be any other country in the world, if they are going to the IMF, that means that the economic situation is that abysmal that they do not have any other option. And in this case of Pakistan as well, what we've seen is that over the last few years, very recently, in recent times, even a lot of our bilateral partners, before lending us additional aid or lending us additional money, they want to make sure that we have some sort of a settlement program with the IMF. That means that the IMF is willing to lend us money in order to address our liquidity constraints, in order to address the problems that we're facing, the economic problems that we're facing. But there's a lot of emphasis, and the IMF, the argument, the IMF debate tends to get highlighted a lot in Pakistani's affairs. But I feel this entire discussion is a microcosm of a much bigger and a larger issue. Now we're talking about $3.3 billion and now the most latest tranche of $1.1 billion. But if you look at Pakistan's total debt, that is the internal and external debt, it is about close to $235 billion. And by 2028, it's expected to go up to $409 billion. So even currently, our debt is 76% of our GDP. And by 2028, it's going to exceed even whatever we generate in terms of our income, the gross domestic product of the country. When you compare $1 billion against $400 billion, it's literally nothing. It's not going to bring not even an insignificant shift towards Pakistan's economic stability. Having said so, we still need whatever we can get. And again, it kind of highlights how dire the situation is. And, time and again, we have to go back to the IMF. We have to go back to other countries, sometimes to the UAE, sometimes to the Saudi, sometimes to the Chinese, to, kind of lend us more money for us to deal with, our economic woes. But this is not the way to go forward. I think this program or any other program would not even offer a bare few months of respite. I think we need to look inwards and address the problem that we're dealing with, because like time and again, we'll keep on going back to them. No $7 billion, no $10 billion would help us kind of fill the gap that already exists in terms of our debt that is, that we owe the world.
And if we talk about the many, requirements that come with IMF, I think with the current economic situation, if we were to shift gears a bit, if we look at Pakistan's energy sector, do you think that the country really can really afford to implement such essential tariffs that come with IMF deals, especially at this juncture where we stand? Because when we talk about socio-political instability, we know that, the current, if you look at the current democratic government, do you think that it effectively can undertake such an initiative, or, going forward with IMF?
So, so two things. So let's take a step forward. So we're talking about the IMF program. Why we need the IMF program is because we're very much in the middle of a debt crisis. And what happens when you have a debt crisis? The interest payments that you have to pay, and there's you have to return, your principal amount as well, in different tranches. And in doing so, Pakistan actually, every year, the amount of money that we are meant to pay, even in this fiscal year, I think it's about 75 billion, it gets rolled over time and again. But even the interest payments that we return, it tends to crowd out investment that would go into actual gaining developmental objectives, such as investing in health, investing in education, investing in sustainable infrastructure, investing in sustainable development, even climate resilience or climate mitigation. So when you are not investing your funds that the Pakistan generates every year into things which are directly linked and associated with growth, it's going to put the country forward. And it is going to implicitly lead to an extra burden on the human capital that tends to exist, that tends to live in Pakistan. But now we're coming back to the IMF program, right? And how it tends to work. So whenever IMF works in a manner, it's somewhat, if I am to give, it's just an analogy, it works like an accounting firm. So it lends you money and then it gives you a program on how you can retrieve that money. What are the different accounting mechanisms, principles that you can make? So what Pakistan has been facing over the last course of many years is the fact that we are unable to generate revenue through tax collection. So they emphasize a lot that Pakistan needs to, collect greater amount of tax. And in Pakistan, actually, I think has one of the worst tax to GDP ratios in the world. But in doing so, the government of Pakistan historically has not been able to broaden its tax base. What it does, it levies additional taxes, a lot of indirect taxes through, energy hikes, there's a lot of food inflation. There are additional taxes on, things that impact the way the common man lives, that are the necessities of the common man really relies upon. So the burden is shifted from the government to the common man. The government itself does not engage in any structural reforms or structural adjustment to deal with the fiscal issues that it has historically grappled with. And that is why every now and then we see there's an inflationary summer. Pakistan, the energy prices, they shoot up. There's additional tax, and nowadays there's this rumor going on. I'm not sure how true that is, but maybe it is going on in the policy circles. This debate about again indulging in a tax on solar production. So this is very counterproductive. But these are all mechanisms that have not been very properly thought out. The only objective is to make sure that the government is able to generate greater revenue through tax collection, and so that it can satisfy the deal of the IMF. And I think the capital budget target for fiscal year 24 is 401 billion PKR. So, that is the end goal. And that's all that matters to the government, is to make sure that they hit the target, not how they hit the target. I think the how is the key underlying thing. That is what should matter the most, because at the end, you should put the person in front of the policy. Everything that needs to be done. When you talk about the economy, we don't mean about numbers. We talk about how prosperous the country is, how it impacts the life of the common man. Can we improve the life of the common man? But if you are unable to give them good quality education, good quality healthcare, good quality, a good quality life, then it's every other policy is rendered useless. And therefore, I think more than what the IMF program demands, I think the way the IMF program is implemented in Pakistan, that's the key issue.
You mentioned about policy imperatives, and I think you're absolutely right that we need to put, the policy in front of the person. But when we're talking about, because you talked about the burden on human capital, so this is where we can also bring in, the implications that IMF would leave for the average citizens of Pakistan. And so how do you think that the average man or the common individuals that live here, they're expected to be affected by these ongoing IMF agreements and anything that's proposed in the economic reform?
So the reason IMF is considered as a notorious entity in Pakistan is because of the very same fact that the government of Pakistan has no other avenue but to go back to the IMF for greater loan, for a renegotiation of another bailout program. It comes with a set of targets that I just mentioned. And in order to implement those targets, the government tends to pass on the burden to the common man. And it makes the life of the common man quite arduous and quite miserable, in all honesty, because nothing is being done to address the structural issues that Pakistan faces. So IMF, debt, all of this is more like symptoms that the economy tends to reflect. I think the core problem is, and it's been referred to many a times, even when Mohammad Aurangzeb was here for the World Bank and IMF spring meetings, I had the chance to meet with him, and we discussed this within our board meetings. That Pakistan's key crisis is the twin deficit of current account and fiscal deficit. These are two deficits, and everything is linked to that. So the current account deficit arises due to a deficit in trade. Pakistan exports less, imports more, and as a result, we tend to owe more to the outside world. Fiscal deficit is because the government tends to spend more and generate less, and it does not have the capacity to meet its need, in a sustainable manner. And because of this, over the years, we've seen this huge debt accumulate every now and then. Every new government that comes, it tends to accumulate even more debt. I think when the PMLN government came in 2013, the debt was about $68 billion, the external debt. When they left, it was about 90 when the PTI government came in 2018. In 2022, when Imran Khan was ousted, the external debt was about $113 billion. And now it's closer to, I would say it's about closer to 130, or it's like 130-ish billion dollars. So when there's so much debt, there's nothing you can do to improve the lives of people. All your focus, all your mentality is shifted towards either making sure that you do not default on your debt. The question that will Pakistan default on sovereign debt, that usually make the headlines every now and then. And the other problem is that, when you're making your repayments on interest, you don't have anything to invest in people to make the lives of people better, but rather they're just only the people, the common man is over compromising. They're paying high level of utility bills. They're paying high amounts of money to consume basic staple food items. They pay like exorbitant amount of money on petrol, on gas, and there's shortages everywhere. There's electricity shortage, there's fuel shortage. So we need to really get a house in order. And no IMF or no other institution is going to come and do it for us. We have to really engage with our local policymakers, local technocrats, energy experts, economists, who can come and set the house in order. And we can go on, but that's another problem. The people that we have at the helm of affairs, they are, to be honest, they're very callous. I'm sorry to say so, and they lack the technical expertise to make those adjustments, to make those changes.
So then, which this brings us to, a natural question where, looking ahead, what do you think are the proposed solutions to mitigate the adversity that you've just mentioned? Because on the common man, but also simultaneously when we're trying to achieve broader economic goals. So how do you think that policy makers can ensure that the burden isn't just, it isn't in one polarity, but it's also distributed fairly and equitably amongst different segments?
Absolutely. To be honest, I don't think the solution is very hard to envision or formulate and even implement. It's got to do a lot to do with actually the will of the government or the will of the policymakers and how they're willing to, how fully invested they are in actually bringing about that change. There are a number of things that can be done. First of all, you need to really strengthen and bolster your private sector. We see a lot of state-owned enterprises still dominating the landscape. We have, these power companies, these discos. We have other state-owned enterprises that tend to bleed the economy, that are burdened, that are a liability on the government and a liability on the national exchequer, but the government tends to bail them out. Like the Pakistani government tends to bail them out. And in doing so, it tends to include additional cost. Secondly, we need to broaden our tax base. We need to implement, greater digitalization. It has been done in neighboring countries. It has been done in India. It has been done in Bangladesh. It is being done in Sri Lanka and everywhere else. It's not a very out of the box solution. It's very simple. It's about how willing you are to actually make the right enforcement measures. And when people question about tax, I'll be very honest. No one, even in the West, if you ask someone, no one voluntarily pays taxes. If it's up to the people who are living here in the US or in the UK or anywhere else, I mean, they don't really want to pay taxes. But the mechanisms are structured in such a manner that, either they have incentives or the enforcement is so strict and is so efficient that they do not have the ability to kind of not pay tax, evade tax. Simple as that. And Pakistan can actually do the same, can implement the same. But I think there are vested interests. People who are sitting in the parliament, they themselves do not want to disclose what they own, what they earn, how they earn. So there's a conflict of interest, very frankly speaking. Pakistan needs to improve their tax base. Secondly, we need to come up with an energy policy. We can really capitalize and harness the solar energy. We need to set up greater solar plants. So that, again, it addresses a lot of problems. Gas, and when I mean gas, I mean petroleum, gasoline, is one of Pakistan's greatest import. We don't produce oil. So, we have to buy oil. And whenever we're buying oil, we're purchasing it in dollar. That's the currency. That's the global currency for transactions. And in doing so, we're again accruing more debt. If we're able to kind of replace our energy needs, as maximum as we could on renewable sources of energy and renewable sources of energy generation, I think we can again mitigate our, both our fiscal issues, and our trade, our current account issues. And I think we need to invest in more human capital. We need to engage with technocrats. Again, it all comes back to the people who are in charge of doing what they're meant to do. And I don't think they really understand how the dynamics work. Majority, I don't want to say that out loud, but unfortunately, majority of our policy implementation is driven by our bureaucrats. And our bureaucrats, they're great, but they're generalists. If you look at their background, someone's a doctor, someone's a historian, someone's an art major, and they come through the civil service exam, which is like centuries old, that was set up by the British, and they've replaced that system themselves, but we're still hanging on to that same old archaic system of government administration and implementation and management. I don't think those people really have the expert knowledge that is needed. And if you look at elsewhere, people have the right people in charge. A physician is doing the physician's job. An economist is doing an economist's job. And likewise, a chemist is doing a chemist's job. But here, everything is so amalgamated and so confused and convoluted that it's hard to actually realize tangible reform implementation. So we need the right people in the right order. We need to invest in private sector development. We need to broaden our tax base. We need to look at our informal economy, which according to certain figures is 60 to 70% of the GDP of the country's GDP. So things like that, the solutions are well known. Implementing them is not too hard either. It's just about investing some time in, strategizing midterm to long-term plans, and then implementing, then being driven by short-term vision, which every government has. They do not look beyond 4 to 5 years, and nothing's going to happen in 4 to 5 years.
Thank you, Nauraiz. I think we're trying to get an understanding of where we're going with IMF, and you steered us in a direction, and we have a number of things to look into. So I think that brings us towards the end. So thank you for joining us, Nauraiz. We'll be back with more updates on where the IMF deal will take us. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, perfect. No, absolutely. No, thank you so much, Ahmed.